everybody. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for all coming. We've packed this room. That's amazing. So this is Side Hustle, how to make games after work hours. First of all, I want to say that it doesn't necessarily need to be work that you're trying to make games after. It could be your family or relationships, social obligations. There's a lot of different things. There's just life. Work hours just worked well with our title. Another little bit, we are going to have time for some questions at the end, so get those ready. I think we're going to start by introducing everybody. So we're going to go name, location, your day job, your side hustle, and then how you got into that side hustle situation. So I'll start off. My name is Olin Olmstead. I am originally from Seattle. I've spent a lot of time in California, but I recently moved back here. My day job, which I left a couple months ago, but when I pitched this panel, I had a day job. I was working at a programmer at a tech company in the Bay Area, making HR and finance software, so enterprise software. And my side hustle, I own a company called Lit AF Games. I'm a programmer and designer, mostly focusing on mobile. So I have one party game called Catchphrase Against Humanity. I have a puzzle game called Bunny Blocker. Those are my published games, and then I'm working on some other casual mobile titles. And how I got into making games on the side is, so I learned programming in college, and a lot of my projects were games. And then after I graduated and got a full-time job, I was teaching myself Unity because I just loved it. And then after publishing my first game, I was like, wow, this is awesome. You can have this creative endeavor that is available to the masses. And ever since then, I've been loving it. So that is me.
Hi there. My name is Trevor Harron of Blue Heron Entertainment. And my day job was also in software. I was a software contractor, more specifically a software tester and developer. And now I'm going to be a graduate student as of tomorrow, so I better get those books. So my side hustle is my business, Blue Heron Entertainment, in which I make, publish, and design my own board games. And those have been kickstarted, self-published, getting ready for another Kickstarter, so that's going to be fun. And I got into the side hustle business because at my day job, I saw that managers weren't managing stressed out employees correctly. So I started designing a game about managing stressed out employees. And I had a ton of ideas and decided, I'm going to take one of those ideas, take it to Kickstarter, publish it, and see how it goes from there. And now I'm here. So.
Nice. My name is Emma Larkins. I'm local to Seattle. And day job next, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my day job is I work at Mox Boarding House, Seattle and Ballard, which is just north of here. If you haven't checked it out already, you definitely should. It's a lot of fun. My side hustle is I'm a tabletop game designer. My first published game was Heartcatchers, and I have a couple other titles that I'm currently working on publishers with getting released. I'm actually showing Confabula Rasta in the Indie Mega booth for today, if you want to go checking that out. And I got into the side hustle business, super awkward, dorky story. When I met my boyfriend, now fiance, he was and is a tabletop game designer, so I made a really silly game for him for Valentine's Day one year, and that became Heartcatchers. I gave it to him as a gift. He said, "This is actually pretty good. If you don't do anything with this, then I'm gonna do something with it." I'm like, "Oh, you're just saying that?" He's like, "No, I wouldn't say it. If it was terrible, I wouldn't tell you that it was terrible, but no, it's actually really good." And yeah, I've been dropped off a little bit when I was working for a video game marketing, or doing marketing for a video game company, but since moving to Seattle, I've really ramped it up and have a very solid side hustle.
Awesome. Well, hello there. My name is Nicole Jekich. I'm also local to Seattle. My day job, which kind of like Olin, also recently changed. So I now work as a game designer at Forrest Pruzan Creative. They're a local studio that's kind of known for some of the recent hits like Villainous and the Jurassic Park Danger game. And so it's been a really fun job. And up until that point, though, I was a co-designer on Food Truck Champion. And that was a game that we had worked on kind of while I was doing basically any other job under the sun. So that game was published through Daily Magic Games last year. And mostly my side hustle now is focusing on the Playtest Northwest community. They're also here at PAX, so if you haven't checked them out at the Olive 8 on the 3rd floor, we basically host a bunch of events in the Seattle area. And we're trying to build just kind of inclusive communities that kind of bring out new game designers and encourage development of games.
So you have like a reverse side hustle.
Yeah, kind of switched ever since earlier this year. So when I talk on this panel, I'll kind of preface that where I'll be bringing up how I kind of work towards getting a job, in the industry, which there aren't very many in specifically tabletop. And then also kind of like what I did or how I worked out, getting a game ready for Kickstarter and publishers and stuff like that, while also doing random jobs. So.
Cool. All right, so you guys have gotten to know us. Now we want to get to know you guys a little bit. This is like a raise your hand sort of situation. So we can kind of cater our answers to the audience. So first question is, who lives in Seattle or the Seattle area?
Yeah,
people, awesome. Okay, good. Game design community here, that's good. Second is, who currently or in the past has worked on games before?
Nice.
A lot of people, awesome. Who is like an aspiring game developer? You haven't started yet, but you want to. Cool.
Nice.
Cool, nice, well done. And then my last question, so the question is, why do you make games? I'm going to do 3 different categories. You might not fall into one of these, but so number 1 is you just want to do it for fun. Number 2, you want to make money, be a successful indie, that kind of thing. And number 3, you want to get some experience, maybe get in the industry, get a job at another studio. So number 1, you just want to do it for fun. Obvious, nice.
Sweet.
Number 2, you want to make some money, to be successful. Don't lie to yourself. And number 3, you want some experience and get in the industry.
Nice.
Okay, it's a good mix of everything, really. Okay, so my first question. So we've talked about our day jobs and your side hustles. So when do you find time to make games, and how often do you make games?
Well, I'd like to start off by saying I'm trying to make games all the time. Now, specifically, a lot of companies frown upon making games during the 9 to 5. So one of the best things you can probably have is a journal to keep all your ideas in, so that you can budget the time later, either immediately after work or before you go into the office, and work on some of the ideas, work on some of the prototypes that you have taken in your head, anything that's come out while you're in the shower. But to find any specific time, I prefer early in the morning to help me wake up, help get the neurons firing before going in and hearing about TPS reports.
I want to say, I want to put a stake in the ground. I hate mornings. A lot of people who say like, oh, if you want to do this, you got to get up early, you got to do it first thing when those juices are flowing, like that's okay. But if you are not like that, then there are many of us who you don't have to do that. So just feel confident in your night owl, morning hating selves. It's very important. Also, I would say it really depends on what your, are we doing a side hustle, main hustle? Is that your main hustle, or main job, day job? And like Olin said, very importantly, respect that. Like maybe your main hustle is you are a parent, or you're caretaking someone, or you have a really important relationship in your life. Like you still, the thing you're doing is still a side hustle. Like you don't have to have a job or have a full-time job to feel like you can call something a side hustle. Like you still have a thing that takes up your time. It's very important. So depending on what that is, like I've worked more office corporate jobs where you have a little bit more flexibility in your day. You know, it's like if you take a long lunch, you know, if you're bored, people go on Facebook, you know, and so like you can write stuff in your journal. Like your job could be very flexible. So if you are if you have like a very focused caretaker job, or like where I work, Mox Boarding House, I'm like feet on the floor, like we can't even get on our phones. So you might have a job where you have to be like 100% present at that job when you're working there. So the times that I work on things are like after the day's over, a lot of time bus, transportation, any of those like little corners of the day, if you have that kind of a situation.
For me, I need long periods of uninterrupted time in order to make games, and so that's why when we were designing, my partner and I designing Food Truck Champion, it was mostly weekends, and because we were both kind of working a couple part-time, like, you know, just normal retail jobs and stuff, we had Tuesdays off, and so we just picked like a specific day, said that's the day we're doing game design related stuff, and then just kind of like, you know, didn't really like make a schedule, but just had a couple goals that we wanted to have by the end of the day. And so that I found was really helpful for me, and especially finding other people who also are kind of wanting to make games also I feel helps with like kind of that group work environment. You know, it kind of depends. Some people will get more distracted. If I'm by myself, I will get more distracted.
Oh my gosh,
so, yeah, that's why I tend to like environments, you know, whether it's like co-working or just, you know, going to a cafe with a few people and then we're like, okay, we're gonna work on games. That's the kind of stuff that helps me out when making games.
Yeah, I really like having a set routine. So, I mean, I wasn't a morning person, and I kind of forced myself to be, because I forgot an hour before I would normally get up for work and spend that hour making games, because no matter what happened after work, whether it was happy hour or something else, I had that little bit of daily work gone into my game. And then on a normal, you know, to continue the routine, you know, after work, go work out, eat dinner, and then just spend the rest of the night making games. And then whatever time on weekends I had available. So I do kind of like building in that routine, because I just don't have to think about it. I know a lot of people don't like routines, but I do, I guess. So Nicole, you got into it a little bit at the end there, but where do you guys make games? Do you like to go to coffee shops, or do you spend time at home? And I'll just start off. I like to spend time at my own apartment. Because I really like having that big, my big desk and multiple monitors, and you know, I don't have to buy a coffee or something. I just like that in my own personal space. I can go walk around and then come back, kind of thing. So.
Okay, I'll start. Yeah, I'll start over on this end. So obviously in my day job, we kind of have a studio with other creatives, and so it kind of makes it a little bit easier to be like, hey, I'm working on this thing, you know, hey, let's go and play it, and grab a bunch of people. But I realize that if you know, depending on what your day job or 9 to 5 is, sometimes, you know, you have a dedicated group of people who will play games, you know, say at lunchtime or things like that. And so I've seen people take kind of advantage of that, where you have this hour in between doing whatever, and you're like, hey, I have this game, you know, that I'm kind of testing, let's, you know, go and play it. So those kinds of environments, work for me for playtesting.
There's a lot of wisdom, and again, I think doing the side hustle thing really goes against a lot of wisdom, and I think that's important to be able to take what people say, take it with a grain of salt, because one of the big pieces of wisdom is to have the dedicated space. And it's like, okay, I'm in an apartment in Seattle, I don't have a space that's like just for game design, so I don't even have a kitchen table. I have the coffee table in front of the TV, you know, and so sometimes I spread out there. I have my desk that also serves for everything else that I have to use it for, but more than making physical space, if you can't make physical space, I think is making mental space. And like you said, having routines like that, like this is compartmentalizing your mental processes. So this is the time. So even though it's in the same physical space, separating it out mentally can get you into that design mentality.
Right. For me, I personally, it depends on what phase the game I'm currently working on is in, because at some point, I'm going to be blind to my own designs, and I need to see how other people react to the design itself. So if it's early on in the design phases, it's very much my coffee table, sitting down, writing things out, cutting things out on paper, and trying to see how the mechanics are going to work as it seems to flow. And then afterwards, when it starts to get to a space where it seems to be a little bit more formed, I then go to Playtest Northwest, coffee shops,
Seattle Tabletop Game Designer Meetup?
and Seattle Tabletop Game Designer Meetups. All sorts of sort of events where there's going to be other people there who can be honest and critical of my work. Like, sometimes family and friends can be helpful with that, but you are looking specific, like for that work, you are specifically looking for, is this going to be fun? Are people actually going to enjoy it? So that space is a lot more communal.
Mm-hmm.
But as you said, like having that mental space is just as important to be able to say, like, okay, I'm currently at my job. I need to take this idea, I need to put it in the shelf, and at this time, when I get home tonight, I'm going to revisit it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to write these ideas down, I'm going to come back to it, because I don't have the mental space for that. And if I do, then all of a sudden my reports are not going to be turned in on time or whatnot. Yeah. Which, the side hustle business, like, that's great, but you need to pay attention to the main hustle.
Yeah.
Because that's the main hustle. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
So speaking of community, where is this game dev community you speak of? And can I get involved? And why should I get involved?
Well, let's start with the why. Having other people to bounce your ideas off of is invaluable, since with any game, no one person designs it by themselves. There might be one name on the box, but that doesn't necessarily include all the playtesters, other designers, feedback. So if you have a community nearby, or even if it's just you and your buddies, just start it.
Start your own community.
You have to start your own community if there isn't one. As to how you can find it, Reddit can be a good place to find things. Facebook, there's lots of Seattle indie groups you type in Seattle indie games and
Seattle
there's
designers, Seattle
designers, and those groups will start popping up, as well as coming to events like these. And you can see Playtest Northwest, and they have a constant presence here as well, but they aren't the only group that does this. You just have to go to events to find where these groups might be going.
Yeah, and it's so important to join a community because your head is an echo chamber. I was just talking about getting started in tabletop game design earlier, and you need to get the stuff out of your head into physical form, whatever that is. If it's a digital game, if it's a tabletop game, the longer you keep it like fomenting in your head and even just like in your space, in your house, wherever, it's never going to evolve into what it needs to be. You're not going to have that feedback, which is so essential to game design. All game design is designing experiences, and you won't know what other people's experiences are until you put it in front of them. So it's important for your game, but it's important for you as a human too, because you need this feedback. You need to have these conversations with people like, oh man, this is rough. My child is sick, or I had a really rough day at work, and like, how do I do? It's like, yeah, me too. Like I'm having a tough time, and just knowing that other people are going through that same thing can be a really positive motivator to keep you going when things get tough.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just add a little bit. You obviously mentioned that going out in person is kind of like the best option if you have it. And other game devs will kind of be your best advocates, especially starting out really early on. I've seen it after the last few years of Playtest Northwest. We have like new designer come in, they're kind of unsure when presenting their new game, and you have basically a whole list of like 5 to 10 other designers who are like, that's okay, we're here to help you, let's play your game, let's give you some feedback, and then like help you build it. And it's those communities are really great as far as building the confidence of yourself as a first-time designer, and then just meeting other people that will basically advocate your game and what you make for you. I'll bring up also, this was mentioned in Emma's previous panel, but there are good digital tools, Tabletopia and Tabletop Simulator, where you can basically build digital prototypes. And so if you don't have access, like Seattle has a really big, robust, close close together kind of community. You know, if you're kind of more spread out or don't have the ability to kind of go into like the, you know, physical spaces and stuff all the time, digital options are really good to have, like prototypes that you can just send to people that they can play from wherever.
And just connecting over digital communities too, just socially,
Yeah.
with other designers. Like Twitter is amazing. I know it has its flaws for sure, but for the designer communities, like both digital and tabletop, there's so many people on there. You can get access to them. Like if you tweet to me or pretty much anyone up here and you have a question, like we will respond to that because we care about growing the community, and we like just joke with each other. We have a lot of fun and we get a lot of support just from talking, even when we can't be in the same place.
Yeah, and no one that I know of in the indie tabletop community is going to be mean or not want to help you. We all understand how difficult it is to make games, and we all want to help each other make the best games.
Yeah, I posed a lot of questions to, there's a indie game developers group on Facebook, and I've asked a lot of questions on there, and you know, you get some internet trolls, but a lot of people will be there and genuinely answer your question and actually are willing to have a conversation about these kind of topics. And in terms of in-person, I go to Seattle Indies meetup groups. When I moved back, I just went to the monthly social at Optimism Brewery, which you should check out. You can just find it on Meetup or Facebook, search it there. So what other kinds of tools or resources do you guys use to help make your games?
So in terms of resources, I'm also part of a group called the Indie Game Alliance, which is a group that basically helps indie game designers get their games published, whether it's marketing, making sure that games get play tested. And yes, there is a monthly subscription, but I've been able to have my games play tested at Gen Con. Like this game right here, Who Wears the Crown, is really weird and different, and people being able to have blind playtesting feedback at a place where people go to play games is invaluable to me, to hear what worked and what didn't, things that I can't necessarily do on my own. This group also provides a way to get in contact with manufacturers, with artists, with publishers, everything from metal coins to playmats even, or even legal help, just finding. So the Indie Game Alliance for me, and there are probably other groups as well that provide basically a grouping of these services and a collective bargaining, as it were, to get table space.
Yeah, I would say more of a community tool would be conventions. You know, just like anything. It's really a cop-out or short answer for like, hey, do you want to know how to prototype things, like where to go for print and plays, and depending whether it's digital, like this PAX West is a little more digital focused, so especially if you're interested in digital games for your side hustle, just like go up to any developer, like, hey, what engine are you using, you know, like where did you get started, like what resources, what classes, what YouTube videos did you watch to learn the kind of thing, what communities are you a part of, like anything here. You just, like, especially all the indie people in the indie mega booth up on the 6th floor, you know, like, they're showing off their games, yeah, but at a certain point, they can only pitch their games so many times, and you say, like, so tell me about your engine, and you're like, thank you, I don't have to tell you what buttons to press, I appreciate this moment.
I think that's actually my favorite part about going to, like, PAX and just playing. I just love going to playing indie games, and the person that created it is right there, and you can ask them all the questions you want. Or as opposed to AAA titles, you're talking to a marketing person or something, which is just a little bit different, and you can get way more in-depth into those kinds of questions, and they're definitely willing to answer them because I've been there, I've been showing the games at conventions, and I love talking about my game, especially to other developers who can get, or other designers who can go to a different level maybe than your average consumer.
Oh, let me add on that.
If you have
other resources.
The floor is yours.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the best ones, especially for starting out, too, is free resources. Like, you know, you don't make crap loads of money with board games or games starting out, and so, to me, you don't have to spend a lot of money to kind of get started. So I like using any of the kind of like Google Suite kind of stuff. So I track all of my stuff with Google Sheets, or I write rules in Google Docs and stuff. Like obviously, you know, you can get into like Photoshop and that kind of stuff later, which isn't, you know, free. But when first starting out with making games, I used Magic Set Editor because it was very easy to learn. It was free, and you know, it made it very easy to quickly build a prototype without having to spend like a lot of money or a lot of time like learning the program.
Ooh, also Trello and Evernote.
Yeah, those two.
The LibreOffice suite as well, which is basically the free version of Office you can download online. I use that a lot, as well as the new image manipulation program known as GIMP. So just having those alternatives at my fingertips is great. And I still use some of the important games that I'm publishing right now.
Oh, I would also mentioned a couple in some of the previous panels. GameIcons.net is really good for free vector icons to use for prototyping, as is the Noun Project. And I personally, especially with like marketing materials, like once you get to the phase of, you know, maybe you need a pretty sign for your for your table when you're demoing a game, or maybe you need like an email list. I love using Canva, which is also free and has really good decent templates, so I don't have to actually think about designing something pretty. I can just plug stuff in and it's good to go.
And that's the important thing, is like just getting something out, because as soon as you get an idea out, it physically, all of a sudden it becomes real. All of a sudden you're a game designer, because you have a game that you designed.
That's all it takes, by the way. If anyone asks, like, none of this aspiring, that's fine, that's what we want to go, but if you've made a game, you're a game designer, you should own that.
So how do you come up with your ideas for games?
I sleep, and then I wake up out of these bizarre dreams, and I'm like, I have this idea for like 3-sided cards where you flip it, and then you flip it again, and then there's a third side to the card, and I draw out this like whole grid and stuff, and then I go to my design group and tell everybody about it, and they're like, I don't know. Why are you talking about these things? So it's that happens, but also like some good games have come out of that as well. And I like to do very strategic stuff as well, because I have this practice called Game Design Daily, where I work on game design stuff every single day. Like I'll post to Twitter. Missed a couple, but every single day I do my best to like post something and always be in this game design mindset. And a lot of the activities I give for myself are stuff like brainstorm. Like I brainstormed a list of alliterative game names. So I was just sitting on the bus, like coming up with the names, not even any mechanics or anything. I had like 20 and I took a picture of it. And people were like, oh, Abandon All Artichokes, I would buy that. Like, that's a cool name. I'm like, that's not a game. You don't even know why I'm going to buy that. But then I was like, sure, that's what the people want. And so I made that game. And I have that game, and it's hopefully going to be published soon. So.
That's a lot of fun.
The people can attest.
I would say, so for coming up with your own game ideas is, and I guess what's worked for me is really just kind of find something that interests you, really. Like for me, it was food, and that's kind of been my niche, is to focus on that. And you know, so how I came up with Food Truck Champion is, you know, like eons ago, I was trying to write about food trucks and stuff in the area, and slowly it just became, it kind of, that interest continued, and so I decided to make a game about it. You know, and it was, you know, when I was working a kitchen job and being in the back of the house, a lot of times I had ideas for, you know, how I would make a kitchen game, and, you know, how you would work the line and stuff like that. And so I think it's really fun, and you save yourself some time and headache when you're sitting there, you know, being like, I have to come up with this great idea. You don't necessarily have to. It could just be something that's in your everyday, you know.
Absolutely.
Exactly. If you're with your kids and you have, like, you know, the time you have to pick up toys or something, maybe there's a game out there about picking up toys or something, you know. It's just, the more that you can just kind of fold, you know, game design and game, you know, coming up with game ideas in your everyday life, I think that kind of helps take the stress off of, like, I have to come up with a good idea. They're all lots of good ideas.
For me, I've read a lot of game design books, and for instance, Who Wears the Crown, which you see a lovely prototype right here. I actually came up with this game because every game design book I was reading talked about king making and how bad king making was, and that you need to avoid it at all costs, and it's the scourge of every game. And I said, well, is it though? So like, just asking simple questions can lead to game ideas. I mean, the game that you currently see in front of me, Affectionate Cats and Cuddles, was a game I made in memoriam to a cat I had who passed away. So I mean, he was a very sweet cat. I want to give the love that he gave to me to everyone else. So like, I made a game in his memory. Like, and so inspiration can come from anywhere. Daily life, the brainstorming ideas. Lots of poetry does that too.
Yeah.
And even just asking questions of what can be done.
Yeah.
Like, and playing games. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're playing games, then you see like, ooh, but I want to do a game like this, but different.
Yeah, or better.
Or better, yes, always
like you
better.
play games like, man, I didn't like that. Like so many games come like, I could do this better.
Yeah, exactly.
I think this is like one of the hardest questions for me to answer because I just say it came in my head. I thought of it. But I think the best strategy for me is whatever comes to your head, make sure you write it down.
Oh, yes,
Write
yeah.
everything down. And my like brainstorming sessions are completely different from my like programming sessions. So I'll like get away from the computer, open up a journal, game dev journal, and then just start writing everything that comes to my head. And you just don't want to say no to any crazy, ridiculous idea because it could morph and turn into something, you know, a lot better or something different, or you combine different ideas. And it's important just to draw things out or make physical prototypes or something like that.
Take the time to write everything down. Because if you think that you're going to remember it, if you don't write it down, you're not going to remember it.
So we've gotten some ideas and how we make games, but what if there's a piece missing, like art or marketing? How are you funding your games?
That's always the question, isn't it?
Yes.
So for my first game, Collectors and Capers, I funded that with Kickstarter, and basically had a good chunk of money in my bank account to do Facebook ads, to try to pay to have reviewers like even look at the game and give a review, but really sort of working that those networks that we talked about earlier to find people who are willing to help with marketing, to help get the word out, even if it's a small YouTube channel. Having someone say this game is like this, who is not the designer, is amazing. I mean, starting by asking friends, family, if they know anyone, but you have, for art in particular, you have to start with something that depends on what you're doing with your game. Because if you are self-publishing, you will need to buy the artwork, you will need to find an artist to do that, and you'll need to make sure that you can squeeze talking to this artist and giving them feedback into that slot of time that you allocate for your game and for your design. But if you're going to publishers, that's a completely different beast.
Yeah. Well, I would say, I mean, it's expensive. And it's whether you're doing digital development or whether you're doing tabletop development. Tabletop, you're producing prototypes, you're buying materials, dice, like it blows dice budget alone, just like, they look so nice. Just blows completely out of the water. If you're doing digital, you know, you're potentially paying for engines, for software, Photoshop, different Adobe tools, sound, art, all those sort of things. So I'd really say when you're doing it as a side hustle, it's twofold. Like, it will be a part of, like, something you have to budget for in your life. Like, if you have your main job, you're going to be funneling a lot of the money into that, and other things can potentially suffer for that. So you say, like, you know, maybe I'm not taking as nice of a vacation this year, or maybe it will eat into my entertainment budget, where it's like, I do this instead of going to the movies, or like I buy less video games or something, although those are still good for research. So just making space for it in your budget and realizing that it will cost some money. And the second part is the hustle part. So when you're doing it as a side hustle, like, you have to become a hustler. Like you said, talking to friends, like bartering for things, bartering for art, borrowing someone's laptop who has Adobe, you know, to like use it, or trading your delicious coffee cake in return for some art or something. Going to conventions like this, like PAX is expensive. If you can't get a PAX ticket, like, hey, all these awesome designers are still in town for PAX, and they will be around even if you can't meet them at PAX. A lot of people I know, GDC in particular, I was told to do the poor man's GDC, where you don't pay, you don't shell out the $1,000 or whatever for the tickets. You just go to San Francisco and hang out in the gardens there. I think it's like the Yerba Buena or something. The what? Yerba Buena. Yeah, just hang out. That's where everyone goes to hang out. You don't need to necessarily shell out. So make as much space in your budget as you can for game design, but if you can't squeeze any more, there's a lot of ways to get the stuff you need without paying money for it.
Yeah, just continuing to hit on the taking advantage of free resources or just being very resourceful. When we were building up and playtesting Food Truck Champion, you know, I was working a couple different kind of just basic minimum wage jobs. Yeah. So I didn't have like any money really to throw at it. So it was very apparent at the beginning of this process that I was not going to run a Kickstarter. I'm not going to like do all those funds and worry about you know, shipping and like all the, you know, international costs and stuff. And so for me, it was really about focusing on a publisher to find, you know, one that would maybe like a lighthearted game about food that's like somewhat strategic, you know. For me, so figuring out, I guess, your limitations, and then basically that also kind of helped me with where I was going to go next with the game. And so, you know, and publishers are great because, you know, obviously you don't have that complete control over your game, which is kind of the trade-off, but what I was getting in return is basically someone who already had done Kickstarters before, so they had that kind of like those credentials about them. They already had a group of people or, you know, an audience following them, so I didn't have to worry about, you know, necessarily building that all from scratch. Like I had been doing that while playtesting. But you know, having a good partnership and figuring out what kind of you want out of it and what they want out of it will really kind of help you with kind of where you want to take your game for publishing and getting it funded.
I think that's really important too, like what you're saying, being okay with handing off to a publisher. Be okay with accepting help. You know, be okay with asking for help for these things. Like if you can't do something and your friend is like, oh, you know, I'll help you all like go to this convention, you know, I'll show it off, I'll play test it, you know, it's like, let them do it. So many people are just like, oh, I can't put that on you, like it's too much, but that, like, you need help. If you're doing it as a side hustle, you can't do it all yourself. Right.
Yeah, luckily one of my good friends from middle school is a composer, so he does the music for my games, like for free, which is amazing. But the other things the biggest part of my budget is definitely the artwork and the sound. And I'd say what keeps that down is one, scope of project. Especially if you're starting out, keep your scope of your project really low so that you can, one, actually finish it, and then number two, so that the stuff you do have to pay for, whether that's programming or art or pieces or whatever, is as low as possible. And then continuing on what Emma said before is, you have to fit it into your budget. And for me, it's about priority. So what in your life is a priority to you? And if making games is a priority to you, then you will figure it out, and you'll cut back on some other things in order to make room for games.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Also with marketing, how many of you have blogs, Twitter, social media? You guys can already start doing marketing. You're posting consistently, which
for free.
Which admittedly I have not been great at that recently, but being able to write about games, ideas about mechanics, or what the process is in the current game's development, like getting your voice out there. It may seem like you're shouting into the void, but you start getting people to follow you, you start going to events, you start accumulating more of a community around you, and that will help with your marketing. And sometimes you may pay for outreach, but if you don't, then you just need to be consistent. And if that's once a month, that's once a month. If it's every day, like with Game Design Daily, then that's what you do. But finding a schedule to do that.
I think consistency is the keyword there. All the different strategies I've looked up for marketing games, which honestly I'm not that good at, but the biggest thing is just doing it consistently. If you're going to have a podcast, just do it every week. If you're going to post on Twitter, do it multiple times a day. But just keep with it, because it's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to build a community overnight.
Yeah.
You just need to keep doing it, again, consistently. I wanted to say, while we're on the marketing kick, how do you market your games? I said that in my head, and I thought you heard it, but
wait, I'm like psychic link over
Here, I'll start. Kind of psychic link again. Have a blog or have a social media presence. So I didn't start making games just like I didn't say, oh, I'm gonna make games. I'm gonna start. It was a little bit more complex than that, and kind of like led me down this kind of interest of games. So I started acrosstheboardgames.net, and we started basically reviewing games, and we're just talking about games, and that kind of helped kind of build up an audience and kind of, I guess, legitimize me as like a designer, or not necessarily a designer, but like someone who would talk about games and knows what they're talking about with games. And so, when years later I was like, well, I kind of want to make a game now, I kind of had this audience to kind of pull from, or, if I shared something about it, they'd be like, okay, I know that person because of what they shared on their blog, or what they had shared, about, this hashtag of Game Design Daily or things like that. So having, like you said, consistently, and then basically the earlier that you can do it, the better, because then you kind of show that track record of you, dedicating yourself to.
I knew you. I knew of you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's how I started.
There's the community thing, and this is I tell people, they're like, oh, it sounds like a lot, it sounds like a lot of work, and you do need to do it in a way that works for you. Like, what works for someone else, like all the wisdom you read might not be your thing. Like, maybe you like knitting, and you're gonna knit like a video game console koozie or something, and like give those out to people for free. Like, whatever kind of speaks to you, that's the thing that you're going to stick with and be passionate about, and will let you do the consistency, because it's something that really works for you. And you can do it before you really have success, or a lot of people will be like, oh, I can't, be famous now, or I can't be known now because I haven't done anything yet. But real talk, like for me, I have one game published that did maybe like $6,000 on Kickstarter. And I have other games that I'm working on. I have a lot of stuff that I do, but I'm not, a person who has, like Joseph raised $160,000 on Kickstarter. I haven't done a million successful Kickstarters. I don't have super well-known games, but because I've been consistent, because I've tweeted, because I've written, because I've done panels, like put myself out there, you don't have to wait. There's not going to be a right time when you've achieved a level of success to talk about what you do. Like, you just have to start.
You have to get to that success at some point, and getting yourself out there is the way that you get there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Chicken and egg.
Exactly. And so for me, it's starting with a blog, starting just making games, going to conventions, and meeting people, and starting to build a following from there, finding communities, using the Indie Game Alliance, and letting them know, like, hey, this game that I've sent to you for playtesting is going to Kickstarter at X date. Can you help me coordinate with that? Like, so for instance, using that as a resource, using the groups that you can either make or are a part of is important, and just talking to people, being shameless in a way about what you're working on.
Well, being like shameless and genuine at the same time.
Oh yeah. I mean, you don't want to be false about it, because no one wants to be that Kickstarter that 3 years later still hasn't given to their backers. But what you want to do is you have to be one of your biggest advocates, and find those people who are going to be big advocates for your games. Friends, family, people who have played your game once and go, oh my god, this is the best thing ever. Do you have, where can you buy a copy? Where can I buy a copy? And say, you can have this one for free. Just go and play it and tell people about it. Like, you just have to get yourself out there, basically.
I think you guys have said a lot of good things. Personally, my 2 games I have out are self-published and self-marketed, and I realize marketing is really freaking hard. And so don't be ashamed if you want to go the publisher route, because they handle a lot of things for you. So really my strategy now is to market towards publishers.
Yeah.
So I've got a different strategy of, you really got to research the publisher, what kind of games are in their portfolio, what are the kind of things are they looking for, and then try to pitch from there.
Right.
So that's what I've been doing. So we're almost getting there to where we want to have questions from you guys. So you can start lining up while I ask one more question of the panel. Is there any tip or topic we've not gotten to that you would like to bring up?
Ooh. Side hustle is hard, and just like hear me say that and internalize that, because I think so many people are struggling with it. So many people feel like they're failing, and they're just like, why is this so hard for me? Like, I see those people on the panel, or I see those people on Twitter, and they're like, oh, you know, I worked 80, 90, 100 hours last week, and I'm gonna do it again next week, and this is so great, and I'm making all these games, and a lot of people can't do that. You have needs, and you need to respect your needs, because it's like, I need a lot of sleep. Like my designer friends will sleep like 4, 5, 6 hours a night, and I'm like, I can't do that. And I feel bad, I feel guilty because I'm not putting all this time into it, but it is hard, and everybody's needs are different, and don't look at someone else and say like, oh, I should be doing it. Don't should on yourself, because it's hard for all of us, and it's important to respect that.
Yeah, I guess the only thing to add, and it's been mentioned I think a couple times, and it's been said in panels too, is the best thing to do is to really just make yourself a prototype and get started. That's the quickest way to kind of get yourself into making a game and to see kind of what's wrong with it. Because if you stay up in your head, then you don't really know if this game's going to be fun, or if people are going to enjoy it, or if it's what you actually kind of intended. And I try to tell people that there is no, especially in playtest communities, you don't have to worry about the look of a starting prototype. I've literally had people draw prototypes on the back of Farside like daily calendar, pieces of paper, sleeving magic cards with stickers on them. Like anything's fine. Just get started. It's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
The final note I'd like to hit is that you have to treat the side hustle like a job. It may not be your main job, but it depends on what you want. If you want to get the game out there, you will need to focus on having the time for it.
Yeah.
To figure out what that budget is in terms of mental, physical, monetary, like budget, all of that, and expect that it's going to be a lot of work. You need to be consistent. You need to treat it with the respect that you would treat your day job, or more so if you don't like your day job.
For me, like they've said, it's really hard, and so that's why I think it's important to love the process. You have to really love making games, the hard parts, the easy parts, the good parts, the bad parts, because it's a really long journey from making to idea to publishing, and if you just want the glory of having a game out there that's success, that's not what you should be in this industry for. You should be in it because you like playing games, making games, talking to other people about games. Love the process.
Yeah.
Cool.
Absolutely.
All right. First question.
Questions.
Or if you want to do that.
All right.
Thank you. All right, you're up.
All right, my name is Sean. I am a game designer, and I have a couple games out. You guys also elaborated on this. You guys all said that you talked about Kickstarter and things like that. Do you have any tips or any kind of, elaborate more on how you guys deal with running a Kickstarter while also, having a main job?
Well, first accept the fact that you're maybe not going to be able to post those nice shiny videos that a lot of the bigger Kickstarters are going to do. Where like, congratulations guys, we've done 10,000% funding, we're going to live stream at Gen Con. Like, you may not be able to do that, and you really need to think about A, Kickstarter's cut. because you may fall short if you don't, and no one wants to be caught holding a bag for a couple $1,000s. And B, think of the three main scenarios. What happens if you are just successful, if you don't succeed, and then are wildly successful? Because if you aren't prepared for those three scenarios, or like don't have planned out like shipping, fulfilling to backers and all of that, then you're going to be burned by that.
I'm not sure how on topic this is. We haven't touched on it quite yet. Sometimes you need to reconsider your main hustle a little bit. And if that's family or caretaking or something, you might not have as much wiggle room. But when I did my first Kickstarter for a science fiction novel, I was actually working at a company that cared about getting into the Kickstarter business, or they wanted to do some adjacent projects. It was a tech company, and so they kind of let me take some time from my regular. They were very supportive. And if I spent less on my day job, they were okay with that. I think it's very important to consider, and right now the job that I work is part-time, so I have more time to do that. So if you're really serious and at the point where you're doing Kickstarters, consider there will be a point where you need to dial back from your main hustle. And again, if your priorities are to design these games, you might have to get creative and find ways that you can live while still making that time, because it does take a lot of time.
Yeah, I'll be really quick. The best rule of thumb for Kickstarter is to under-promise and over-deliver. Jamie Stegmeyer says it a lot, and that if you haven't gone to his resources, I think those are the best if you want to understand how to learn to run a Kickstarter. Me, obviously, personally, I just said I don't want to do it. I'll give it to a publisher. But to run a successful Kickstarter, under-promise, basically have a couple tiers. Have something that's about your game. Don't get too involved in getting a whole bunch of frilly stuff or T-shirts or things like that don't matter. Kind of just focus on the game itself, and if you can deliver more stuff later, that's great, but don't promise it, because if you can't, then it kind of looks bad.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah. But thank you for your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. It's probably for Olin, that anybody can chime in. You mentioned you had a boring day job as a finance programmer, and your side hustle is also basically a programmer. I'm wondering if that's helpful because the aptitudes carry over, or if it poses a special risk for burnout, or is it you're a cracks or something, you can come home and have more use than to stare at a computer. If it does pose special risks for burnout, what have you done to mitigate that scenario?
Interesting. So my day job versus the side hustle, the programming was similar, and I had some things carry over, but in terms of making games, it's a very creative process. I use Unity, so to me it was very different styles of programming. In terms of burnout, I take a lot of breaks. I almost will work for an hour straight. I'll set a timer, and after that hour, I will force myself to stand up and walk around and forget about the actual game developing that I'm doing. So it's just not sitting there for a long period of time. And I may work for 5 hours in a day, but it's taking very strategic breaks to get my mind off of just constantly working.
Like CrossFit for your head.
Yeah, like CrossFit for my mind.
Yeah.
If I can add, depending on where you are working, you need to be very careful that the company that you work for as your main hustle doesn't own your game simply because you are part of that company. Amazon is terrible with this because everything you do in your spare time is Amazon's. So word of caution there. Talk with your HR, make sure you understand the non-compete clauses and everything. Thankfully, when I was a software programmer, my company was very supportive and said, as long as you don't do it on company time and company dime, you are A-okay.
The burnout's a really thing. When I was doing marketing for the video game company, I couldn't spare the extra energy, and that's why I moved to something that was retail is great for that. You don't make as much money, but it's very compartmentalized. And if you are a person who kind of needs that differentiation, it can definitely impact. Like you can definitely burn out if what your side hustle is too similar to your day job.
Yeah, and that's a similar way that I avoided burnout on this project is I took that job in the kitchen because I was going to stand up all day and move dishes and cook food and stuff and do things that were not in front of a computer. And so when I got home, like, sure, I did physical work and I was a little bit tired that way, but I wasn't like, you know, looking at a computer screen being like, oh God, not again. And I was kind of more welcoming to it because I had a job that was not like that at all.
And also work on multiple games if you have multiple game ideas. Because if you work on the same game idea, you end up in going down the rabbit hole, which can be great if you finish the game, but if you realize halfway through that the game's not going anywhere, maybe you could have stopped, taken a break, worked on some other ideas, or even just walk around, prevent that burnout.
Good question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have about 5 more minutes, so answers quick.
So the biggest question I have is, what do you recommend for people who, due to their main job, have to take very long breaks from game developing and have trouble getting back into that flow? So for example, like I'll get a rhythm going, I'll get a project going really well, and I work on a submarine, so we disappear for like 3 months at a time. Absolutely. And then when I come back, I have a lot of trouble. It's usually a project killer, is getting back into that flow.
I think it's important to, first of all, and this is if you're working on a lot of games too, it can be the same thing. If you leave one game for a long period of time, is leave it in a really great state. So it's so easy to be like, oh, I'm jamming on this, and then all of a sudden I have to leave, and it's just kind of this amorphous thing. But as many like very detailed notes, like if it's digital, then having a file structure, if it's physical, having all the components, having a list of like exactly where it's at, all of the things that you wanted to do with it, and formalizing it, and that makes it a lot easier to come back to.
Yeah, and if you can have a, if you have a trusted like co-designer or partner on the game, I found that helps out a lot too. You know, in my current day job, I am of that variety where, all the games that I would make in my time go to this company right now, so I can't make games. So what I can do, though, is I can continue to play test other games, or if I have a partner, they can work on the games, and then I can, again, play test and offer feedback that way. And so that's how I stay engaged that way without,
Simply start by playing games again and read through all the notes that you have, because once you start doing that, you start going through the whole process of what were you thinking and sort of the ideas that you were having and where the sticking point seems to be. Then you can start getting back into the flow. But definitely play games again, because that's why we're all here, because we love games.
Yeah, if there's any way you can bring your game development journal with you, you can bring any. I don't know what you can bring.
Just get better.
And just keep drawing, keep writing those ideas down. But I haven't been in that situation. But
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, I was wondering what are some of the biggest advantages of having a publisher?
Ooh, okay, all right. Hopefully they're not watching.
A big disadvantages?
Disadvantages.
Oh, wow,
so
okay.
I'll say it wasn't necessarily a disadvantage, but so with Food Truck, we had pitched it originally as a 2 to 4 player game, and that's what we had. So certain publishers will have certain needs, with our game, we needed a solo mode because that's what people wanted. So we had to develop a solo mode, and we had to extend it to 5 players, which, with current card count can get a little bit dicey, And so that was a very specific example of kind of negative things with the publishers. You might, because they're signing the game, or however that contract works, you may have to do some changes based on kind of their feedback or what they want to publish.
Say not having control anymore. It's so hard having been able to make all the decisions, even if you're happy, even if they're going to make great art and they're going to do all this stuff. I find the courting phase is so fun because you're like, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to work together, and as soon as the contract is signed, it feels like deafening silence to me. And it's so hard not to be like, hey, so are we going to start promoting this? When's stuff going to happen? But it's it's theirs now, and it's even if you wanted that really badly and they're going to do great stuff, it's so hard not to be engaged as much in everything that's happening.
Yeah, and with tabletop, you know, you need like that year, you know, of like production, like actually going overseas and like, you know, printing it and stuff if that's what you're doing. And so the time, you know, sometimes when you sign with a publisher, you know, you're not going to be the next game in line. It's like years in advance in their production schedule. So that's another thing that can be negative about signing with publishers, but yeah, there's trade-offs.
So, in simple answer to your question, it depends on the contract, because you may lose completely all control over the game entirely. You may, if you have paid for art, you've lost that money. No company is going to give you money for the artwork that you paid for. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why I had published my own games, because not to sound overly pretentious, but I don't trust other publishers with the ideas that I have.
Yeah, that's fair.
I've had people try to buy my games, and I said, well, what are you going to do with it? And I didn't like what I heard.
Okay, thank you. I think we take one more question. Sorry.
So one of the tips that you guys gave earlier on was to get out there, talk to other devs in the community. As a fledgling developer myself, I got my business license, I set it up to try to give myself a portfolio and eventually get into games on with 5 years work experience route. I have my own studio, it's called Software by Your Mom. I use itch.io, so softwarebyyourmom.itch.io as a website. I've gotten one game out there that I use a practicum project in college. But the meat of the question I'm asking here is, how do you guys minimize the risk of losing an idea, having it stolen from right out from under you?
You can't really prevent people from taking ideas. Ideas are key. It's the execution of the idea that's important. There have been tons of games about cats, tons of games about the kings that belong in the king, couples, food trucks, there are tons of games about that. The idea itself is key. What you need to focus on is getting the execution of that idea and that expression as crystallized as possible.
That's really hard for new designers and for people to hear. Like, it's nothing about your idea in particular, like, no offense or anything. It's just like, get into a habit of just like treating your ideas like that and coming up with new ideas and building on new ideas, because it's really what you do with them that makes or breaks the game. And if someone, you know, takes an idea or you have like a really good one, yeah, they might do something, but it will never be the thing that you would have done with it. So there's risk. I'm not saying there's no risk, but the benefit of getting known, making these relationships because you've been open and vulnerable and shared far outweighs any of the risk.
Yeah, and I think I want to add real quickly too, is a lot of times, you know, you see these different trends in board games too, and so sometimes you'll see similar themes. While we were developing Food Truck, there were two, I think before it came out, there were 2 other food truck related games that came out on Kickstarter. And I wasn't really that worried about it because 1, they were completely different games, and 2, we had been sharing that we were making this game for the past like 3 or 4 years. And so I don't really worry about people necessarily stealing my ideas. I just, again, try to make a way to show that, you know, my game is different and this is what makes it special and those kinds of things. I mean, it does sometimes bring up some weird things where we had a similar name to one that was on Kickstarter, and so we changed the name, right?
Yeah.
But like, I don't worry about people signing NDAs or things like that. I just kind of continue to push forward on my idea and then executing it how I want to. So yeah.
Yeah, I would just try not worrying about it. I think the benefit of sharing your idea and sharing your game with as many people as possible outweighs the downside of that slim chance of actually getting copied or cloned of your idea. All right.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.